Hello, welcome to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I am Robert, the narrator, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Confessions. Well, as I predicted a couple of episodes ago, it looks like this is going to be Dungeons and Dragons month at Confessions. This will be my third episode in a row about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Started back in episode 10 with my favorite top 10 RPGs of all time, and I discussed 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons because it was 8th on my list. And episode number 11 was an episode I really wasn't planning on doing, but I did a video response to a fellow RPG vlogger, Ivan Mike, in regards to the idea that I like 5th edition because all of the character classes are equally relevant and useful. Wasn't planning on doing that one, but I was planning on doing this video that follows this episode. And first I wanted to say I get questions online in regards to my nickname, Robert the Narrator. And narrator, it's not narrator. It's a silly little nickname that I came up with. It's narrator, Narraider. It's something silly that I came up with. I never had a cool nickname as a kid, so I'm forced to come up with my own nicknames as an adult. But essentially what it means is it's a mashing up of the word narrator with the word raider. And I thought of it because I think it's a good name for how I feel about role-playing games. I really love role-playing games. I love the storytelling and the narrative, so I like the RP, but I also like mechanics and combat, almost in equal measures. If I'm playing a game and it lacks either, I'm not happy. So I kind of smush narrator with raider to kind of denote that I love both aspects of role-playing games, mechanics and combat, and great narrative and storytelling and role-playing. So that's what it means, in case anyone wasn't able to figure it out or just thought that it was narrator. But on to the rest of the episode. So this episode, again, a third in a row for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, I want to discuss my favorite mechanic from 5th edition D&D. And that is the inspiration mechanic. And the reason I want to discuss it, I spoke on it a little bit in episode 10, obviously talking about 5th edition. But the reason I wanted to discuss it is because I've been playing a good amount of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons since it came out. I took part in the playtest. I've played with 3 different dungeon masters, and none of them use my favorite mechanic from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, inspiration. None of them use it. So I wanted to talk about some of the reasons for that and some reasons why other players may not use the mechanic. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss that right now. So what is the inspiration mechanic from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons? So if you're not familiar with it, or you didn't listen to episode 10, I'll give a brief description of what inspiration is. So inspiration is kind of connected to 4 traits that they added to 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Those traits are personality traits, which are small, simple ways that help you set your character apart from other characters. Ideals, which are the things that drives your character to do what your character does. Bonds, which are your character's connection to people, places, and events in the world. And then finally, flaws, the things that represent some of your character's vices, compulsions, fears, or weaknesses. So these 4 traits are linked to the inspiration mechanic. And essentially the way it works is when your dungeon master finds that you're responding to a situation in accordance with one of those traits, personality traits, ideals, bonds, or flaws, as a reward, he can give you inspiration. You can either be inspired or not. And if you are inspired during the game, you can spend that inspiration basically to get a bonus to a saving throw or an attack roll. So that's the way it works. That's really awesome, really cool. Wizards of the Coast. It's you don't have to use it, and my DMs don't use it, but I really love it because they didn't just try to jump onto the bandwagon as far as the popularity of story games. I don't think. Well, actually, in a way they did, in a way they did not. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is they didn't just make it a minor part of 5th edition and hope that people would like it. They put on the Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, they put personality traits, the ideals, bonds, and flaws right on the front of the character sheet. So they weren't, hiding it on the back of the character sheet in the corner and expecting to get kudos from story gamers. I actually said I think it was in episode 10 or 11, that I don't think they created the inspiration mechanic to kind of jump on the bandwagon, but that was silly. I shouldn't have said that. Wizards of the Coast is a company. They're a business. They're of course in business to make money. So I'm pretty sure that they created the inspiration mechanic to appeal to players who otherwise would lean a little bit more toward narrative and story. And I don't think that's a bad game. Profits and money and business and capitalism aren't dirty words to me. I always chuckle a little bit when I hear someone complaining that a company is just doing something to make money, because I start thinking to myself, so what you're saying is you don't want the company that makes your favorite game to stay around and be profitable? Is that what you're saying? So it's always a little silly to me when people complain that companies are making decisions to make money. It always makes me laugh a little bit. But anyway, my dungeon masters don't use the inspiration mechanic. And as I said, I've played with 3 different dungeon masters since 5th edition has come out. All of them I am familiar with, and I've been playing games with these guys for a long time, so I really, really know them pretty well. And I know the reason that they don't use the mechanic, but it still makes me a sad panda that they don't use it. The one reason that the DMs that I've played 5th edition with don't use it is because they couldn't care less about how accurately a player in their game is portraying their characters. The guys that DM 5th edition for me tend to be a little bit more toward the power gamey optimizer side of the hobby. That is kind of their play style. So it never really occurs to them to reward players for accurately portraying their characters, because that's not really one of the things that's important to them when they role play. It's kind of what I like to call the video gameization of role-playing games, where like a like a video game, players look at their characters like they're playing a video game. The character is just an empty avatar that is a tool for them to make the next best tactical decision. So they don't want anything to come between their next best strategic choice and their character. Personality, background, story, morals, anything. They want to be able to make the next best strategic choice unfettered by those things. As a matter of fact, the only story that's important to that type of gamer is the story that leads them to their next combat. And that's not, that's just an analysis. It's not a criticism, because I don't try to criticize folks for how they have fun. It's like there's a RPG vlogger that goes by the name of Dungeon Bastard, and he talked about D&D Edition Wars a while ago, and he had this saying. I thought it was really funny, and I totally agree with him. He said, criticizing someone for the edition of Dungeons and Dragons that they like is like telling your best friend his fiance is ugly. You might be right, but you're still a dick. You know, and I agree with that. I would never criticize someone for the types of games that they like. I will, you know, give my opinion on what I like, and the type of games that I like, but I would never criticize someone for what they like. So it's just a point that to these guys, accurate character portrayals are not important to them. Another reason why they don't use the mechanic is because I know a couple of them really don't like action points. You know, in some games you have action points or bennies, little points that you get rewarded or you just naturally get. And so, yeah, that's they don't like action points. And so that's the reason why the guys that I play with don't use the inspiration mechanic. Now, why do other players not use it? I have some theories on that as well. Now, as far as old school gamers are concerned, I've literally had conversations with grognards or old school gamers in regards to these types of mechanics. And their attitude is, you know, I've had old school gamers say this to me: I don't need no role-playing game to tell me how to role-play. You know, they really are offended by those types of mechanics. And one of the reasons for that is a lot of them have been in the hobby since the early days, where the hobby was really DIY, do it yourself, and there wasn't a lot of guidance on some of the finer points of role playing. So they were really making it up as they went along. And their attitude is, some of the old school gamers, that when you sit at my table, you had better have your stuff together, and I'm not going to bribe you to do your job. That is their attitude. And I've had old school players actually say that to me. Now, I've been in the hobby for a while, not since the early days of Dungeons and Dragons. When I came in, the hobby had started to focus on giving advice. I kind of lean toward the modern day sensibility that recognizes that not all players are the same, but that I feel like you're still welcomed at my table. It's really hard to find players who you click with on any level. So to say that you can't be at my table if you don't have the same level of expertise that I have is for me, it's kind of crazy, because it's hard. People say it's hard to find a good GM. I find it hard to, you know, find players who you line up with for the most part and want to get the same thing out of the game. So the fact that they don't role play as much or don't like combat as much as me, I'm not kicking anybody away from my table. And the other point that I want to make is that if you can pull out a little bit more of what you want from a player with a bribe, why not do it if it's going to enrich your game? I'm sure you know those players, the guys who make characters with no background, they're an orphan, they have no family, they have no personality, no beliefs. If you can pull them a little bit further toward you with a mechanical benefit, why not do it? It's just going to enrich your game. And I really feel like that is a good way to sync up with your players a little better. But old school gamers definitely feel like you should have your stuff together when you sit down at my table. And it's kind of interesting that some power gamers don't even want those action points, don't even want those benefit mechanics. I say that they really believe in being a power gamer, because there are those out there that don't like those kind of mechanics, even if they were going to get a mechanical bonus. So you really have to be committed, a committed power gamer, to give up a mechanical benefit because you don't want to role play or give your character a background. That's really interesting and really funny to me. And I think one of the other reasons why old school gamers or grognards may not like these type of mechanics is because the history of the hobby, there have been really contentious times. I mean, I guess they've always existed, where players who play Dungeons and Dragons and players who play more, I guess, games that are really story-based games have always butt heads in the hobby. In the early 90s, White Wolf Games started their storyteller line, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf, Mage the Ascension, and they actually had print ads that would criticize players who played Dungeons and Dragons. So the gauntlet was thrown down, the war was started, and I'm pretty sure a lot of old school gamers or grognards feel like, hey, you're not going to put me down and then sneak your storytelling mechanics into my game. So I'm sure there's a little bit of a bitterness there, and that's why I think that maybe some of the old school guys really may not like these mechanics. I've been told as much. And I think lastly, some players are just not good at portraying other people. They're not actors. They don't have the skill. They're introverted, so they really don't dig that play style that a mechanic like Inspiration brings to the table. So a lot of them don't feel comfortable trying to portray other characters, so they really wouldn't be able to benefit from a mechanic like the Inspiration mechanic. So those are the reasons why my DMs don't use it. Those are the reasons why I've been told that other players don't use the Inspiration mechanic. And it really makes me sad. As I've mentioned before, right now I'm a little tired of Dungeons and Dragons, so it probably will be a long time before I play 5th edition again. And so it'll be a while before I'll be able to see this fantastic mechanic in practice and being used, and that makes me sad. But yeah, that's the way of the world. So thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. Good morning or good evening wherever you are. Thanks. Take it easy.